I think we'll get started, and we'll invite folks in once they get registered and sign in. And so we'll just continue letting people join us as we go through the meeting. First of all, I want to thank you for joining us this evening. I am Patty McCartney, the Long Range Planner in the Community and Economic Development Division. And I would like to introduce our team. And actually, first of all, I'm not sure if Andrew Gay has joined us. He has. And would like to introduce Andrew Gay, who is a planning commissioner with the city of Arvada. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks,
and
Pat.
then thank you. And then our team members who will be presenting tonight are Jonathan Moore, who is a planner, Carol Ibanez, senior planner, and other team members who are attending are Josie Su, Rob Smetana, and Allison Tremblay. This meeting will be recorded and made available on our Advance Arvada website in the next few days. If you miss any portion of it or would like to share with your neighbors and friends, please direct them to the Advance Arvada website for a copy of this recording. We're really looking forward to working with you tonight and learn from you to get your insight to help develop the long-term vision for future development in the Northwest Arvada area. Next slide, please. Your participation is really important to help identify to create the long-term vision along the Indiana corridor and Highway 72 in the Northwest area. The information from this meeting and other community engagement opportunities will help to create the vision to develop this sub-area plan for future infill or development. The agenda for the meeting this evening includes a summary of the community open house that was held in October of last year, provide an overview of what is sub-area planning and an update of where we are in the process for this plan. We will also provide background information on the existing land use, trails, parks, and other conditions of the area. And then we will finish with an interactive portion, which we will seek your comments and insight on opportunities and challenges within the area, and then conclude with the next steps and questions. Next slide, please. For tonight's meeting, some of the Zoom tools and features that you can use are the mute button. Unfortunately, due to the volume of persons tonight, we are primarily relying or hoping you can participate through the chat feature, which is looks like a bubble, speaking bubble icon on your screen or at the bottom of your screen. And that you can type any questions or comments as we go through the meeting. And then if you'd like to click on the participant button, you can put your names in or rename yourself. And also there's a raise hand feature in that part of the features for the Zoom platform. And then view options, if you would like to zoom in or zoom out of what's being shown on your screen, you can go to the top bar as well and look under view options, and then you can select how you would like to see the Zoom meeting. And also there's a option in there in which you can zoom in or zoom out to see the screen better on your own personal computer. If you're on your phone to speak, you can use enter *6, which allows you to toggle from mute to unmute, and you can enter *9 to raise your hand if you would like to speak. However, we are requesting that we are communicating tonight and get your feedback through chat. And then also we have an interactive tool. It's a Mentimeter platform in which we will be using this tool later in the meeting to get your input through your phone or on the computer. This tool allows you to provide survey responses by phone or your computer by typing in menti.com, and you will be prompted for that portion of that tool during that portion of the meeting. And we also will provide more guidance at that point as well. For tonight's meeting, please provide your feedback with this tool or Zoom chat feature. And now I'd like to introduce Jonathan Moore, who will provide an overview of the public open house that was held last year in October.
Good evening, everybody. If we can move to the next slide, please.
As Patty mentioned, I'm Jonathan Moore, one of the city planners that is working on this sub-area plan. Last October, we were able to get together with about 35 members of the community to present some basic background information for this area, about where the area is, and some maps and information about trails, connectivity, and things like that in the area. So hopefully, of those 35 people, many of you attending tonight were able to attend back then as well. We'll also be holding more open houses in the future, as Patty mentioned, so hopefully we'll see you again then. At that open house, we did hear quite a few comments from folks when we were able to talk to them. The primary ones we heard, we included here tonight, and we'll be focusing on a bit. A couple of the primary ones are that people would like to see more sustainable, resilient retail and sit-down restaurants in the area. That there's a fair amount of traffic currently existing on Indiana streets, and particularly down around the railroad underpass. That there's a desire for more variety in the housing types that are out in this area of the city. A general desire for more trail connections and overall connectivity. That's certainly something that I know I talked to quite a few people about, and was impressed that we had quite a few active members of the community out there that really enjoy the trail system. The last thing is that we also want to make sure that future development respects the existing community that has been built up out in this area over the past 2 decades or so. All those open house presentation boards, as well as all the information that we'll be presenting tonight, is available at advancearvada.org. That website link is at the bottom of the page here, and you're always welcome to visit that site to see what we're presenting and to write comments that way as well. And back to you, Patty.
Thank you, Jonathan. Next slide, please. So a little bit background of information is that sub-area planning, we felt that it was good to explain this a little bit further, is when the city will be focusing on specific geographic areas in the city to create goals and policies for topics such as land use, transportation, design, and others. A sub-area plan provides a guide for development of the area over the next 20 years. The city has identified several focus areas in the city, including Northwest Arvada, and this area is anticipated to develop or redevelop over the next 5 to 10 years. The initial sub-area planning efforts includes this area, Newtown, and Square Lake area, and the last Square Lake area is a collaborative effort with Adams County. Other sub-area plans are expected to be completed over the next few years. The purpose of developing a sub-area plan in the Northwest area is to create a long-term vision and implementation plan to help with sustainable and resilient community development while honoring the existing and development communities in this area. The development of the Northwest Arvada sub-area plan, currently, the status is that we're in the process of identifying and refining the vision and focus for this plan. And with the information and feedback from this meeting and other community engagement opportunities, we will move into the next phase to develop the ideas and recommendations. We will then at that time come back to the public, yourselves, for your input, and that meeting would be expected to be scheduled this summer. The Northwest Arvada plan itself is expected to be completed by the end of this year. Next slide, please. The Northwest Arvada sub-area plan will also continue with previous planning efforts in the city, including the comprehensive plan and the land development code. The sub-area plan will also build off the Candelas retail study that was completed in 2019. These documents are provided on the city website, and the retail study is available at advancearvada.org. Next slide, please. The Northwest Arvada sub-area is generally located along Highway 72 east of Highway 93 to Indiana Street, and it also includes Indiana Street between the railroad line on the south and the city boundary to the north. This area is located The study areas are located both within the city and unincorporated Jefferson County, and the city limits are identified on this map in the dotted line areas. The study area for the Northwest Arvada subarea plan will be developed in 2 phases. The study areas are shown in red, and the plan identifies the first phase along Indiana's corridor, and then the second phase is off to the west along Highway 72. Phase 1 area will be the primary focus of developing the subarea plan, and this initial development for the plan will include land use discussion for the Phase 2 area as well. The remaining detailed elements such as design, connectivity, and transportation for Phase 2 will be determined later. The influence areas that surround the study area are shown on the map in the blue shaded areas. And now I will like to introduce Carol Ibanez, who will continue with the presentation.
Thank you, Patty. Next slide, please. So this is the Phase 1 area that Patty just mentioned, and it is along Indiana Street. On the north side is the end is West 96th Avenue, and it contains approximately 587 acres of properties within the city and Jefferson County. And there are existing commercial activities as well as residential already that has been constructed with, on the south side, you have the Whisper Creek Wildgrass residential, and then you have the Wildgrass commercial site that has retail and office uses that was just recently constructed. And then to the west side along Candelas Parkway, we had the King Supers Commercial Center and the accompanying subdivisions there that are going to be also doing medical office facilities as well that are either under construction or going through the process. There is about 25 commercial spaces total that's been constructed or in the process, and within that we've got a private school, 2 private schools that's on the Village of 5 Parks and also in Candelas. And there are other amenities that would be provided under the King Supers site, as well as the Wildgrass and Whisper Creek development. So to the east and to the west, it is bounded by the Village of 5 Parks subdivision, Whisper Creek Wildgrass, Leiden Rock on the west, and Candelas. Those subdivisions have been in place for, I believe it started like in 2000 when they started going through the process. And then by 2010, construction started happening in Candelas. But for the most part, there is about 4,600 homes within the 4 subdivisions that are primarily single family detached, duplex, and some townhomes, homes that are within the development. There are also, like I indicated, there are commercial spaces in that area, as well as 14 city parks, 18-mile trail, and 2 public schools, and Arvada fire station and police station, and community station, and Arvada fire station is going to be coming in to the west. But a lot of the subdivision for these 4 were developed as a master plan development. And so a lot of the amenities were provided within that subdivision. Next slide, please. So the subdivision all have community subdivision signs that are located at the entrance of the subdivision. So we have an entry feature for 5 Parks, Whisper Creek, Candelas, and Leiden Rock. Again, this is the theme, the subdivision that decided to incorporate it into their entrance. So this is what they look today. And then next slide, please. The following example is of the existing commercial centers that are built today. We have the King Supers at Candelas, which is a single-story building with multiple pad sites that serve the the property owners as well as the retail, the people within the areas that need to go to the store. So these go beyond the city in terms of providing services. There are also on the west side, Candelas also has an example of a more modern building that commercial that is in their commercial center. So they're single story with additional pad sites for other tenant users. Next slide, please. The village of Hyde Park was developed earlier than Candelas, and so this is what they call their town's typical neighborhood commercial. They're five Parks Drive Village Square, and they are two-story buildings with multiple uses, with usually retail on the first floor, and then the second floor are either office for their medical, different businesses, as well as residential on the second floor. So this is an example of the village center there. Next slide, please. The typical residential home architect throughout the 4 subdivisions include a variety of custom, semi-custom homes, craftsmen, more recently more of the modern appearance design, and then you have duplex units and then townhomes. And they vary in different sizes, lot sizes, as well as square footage, and are located throughout the subdivisions. Next slide. So this map shows the zoning district for the properties along the corridor. So in last year, the city adopted a new code, a land development code, and also remapped the city and private new zoning districts. As you can see, all around the subdivisions to the east and the west, they were primarily PUDs. And so the city allowed for zoning districts that would regulate the type of uses that are allowed within a defined district. So for example, on the mixed use suburban resident zoning district, you have a combination of residential, commercial, non-residential uses that are allowed within that zoning districts. And there are specific standards for that zoning district on how you would develop the site, as well as the land uses that are allowed in that area. Then we have the R13 zoning districts to the north, and that allows for residential zoning for up to 13 units per acre. And then we have R24 was also residential, 24 units per acre. So and with potential developments for the north, for Jefferson County to come in and annex into the city, so you would be able to get similar zoning districts as it relates to the comp plan. And on the right side of the presentation, you see the different types of heights for the zoning district. So this has basically is between 35 feet for the residential R6, to 35 feet maximum height. And then for the mixed use suburban is 45 maximum height limitation. And then for the commercial, they are 45 feet maximum height. If you recall, a lot of the Candelas portion of their development, they had higher requirements for heights there. So that has been replaced with these new zoning districts and limits the heights to those height within that zoning district. So the zoning districts, the residential densities, like I mentioned, they have to meet the standards that and do not exceed the requirements for their design as well. And then we have open space designation that primarily already in place. We do have development standards that provides standards of how you develop the site. So for the properties to the west that potentially would come into the city, those would be providing opportunities for development similar to the zoning districts that surround it. And then it's based on the comprehensive plan. Next slide, please. And I turn it over to John.
Thanks. So now we'll head in to start talking about some of the parks, trails, and roads in the area. If we could head to the next slide, please. I just want to say, Nicholas, I do see the question that you asked in there. We'll keep note of that and talk about some questions at the end, if that works for everybody. So on the existing parks, as Carol mentioned, there are quite a few in this area, about 14 city parks. As the map indicates, anything that's in kind of a lighter green color with a darker green text background is a city owned and maintained park. And then there's some other Metro District parks in the area, primarily around the Village of Five Parks and Whisper Creek as well. Those were developed in conjunction with the Metro Districts for the area, as well as the HOAs. And those are privately owned and maintained, but generally open to the public. So the city of Arvada has in total about 3,400 acres of parks, open space, and trails, as well as more than 90 neighborhood parks throughout the entire city. And it's a goal for the city to make sure that every resident has a park within about a 10-minute walk of their home. And that's certainly something that we would want to continue throughout the study area as we head into the future. One thing to point out about this map is just the general open space that exists around the area. Welton Reservoir certainly takes up a fair amount of room, and the National Wildlife Refuge to the north, and Stanley Lake, the regional park, to the west. So when we're looking at this area holistically, as far as where new future development could potentially go, and where additional commercial services or anything else like that could go, it really is just in this study area, which is the primary focus of this group. Next slide, please. Connecting the park system is our trail system that runs through the entire area. As you can see, there's dark green trails that are all off-street trails, and it's a mix of sidewalks, pavement, and some crushed gravel trails as well, and some of the more outdoors or open area space. We also have a fair amount of on-street striped bike lanes throughout the area as well. One major thing that we've heard from quite a few people in the area, and that we're also aware of, is that there's some significant barriers to connectivity in the area when it comes to trails. The primary issue, if you look east to west, is Indiana Streets. Obviously, there's a couple of crossings you can get across, but there are some pretty major intersections. Heading north-south, the Union Pacific Railroad, which runs along pretty much the entire southern boundary of this area, is a significant challenge to add any additional connectivity in the area. Next slide, please. As we have started looking at the area, we have identified a couple of potential connections that you can now see in the purple lines throughout the site. I do want to emphasize these are not planned trails, and there's no direct plan to put these in place, but as we've been looking at both the existing grade in the area, which is the slopes of the area, as well as potential future development, these are natural paths that we've kind of identified. Another thing to point out is the star that's kind of in the center there. Right in that area is a trail underpass that goes underneath Indiana Street, that in the future, when the sites west of Indiana, should they develop, that trail can be connected and provide some additional connectivity across Indiana, where people can cross without having to wait for a traffic signal or anything like that. Next slide, please. So the last thing we want to talk about here are the existing roadway networks in the area. As I mentioned, Indiana Street is primarily the north-south route throughout this entire area, as Alkire Street to the east does not cross the Union Pacific Railroad. Indiana is really the primary area. We're certainly well aware of the issue of traffic and congestion right at the railroad at Indiana. It's something that the city annually submits grant funding for to the federal government to get assistance for that. And it is on a longer range plan to try and improve that. Similarly, we're showing the general alignment for the Jefferson Parkway that is also part of a separate future plan. We want to acknowledge these as they're absolutely part of the roadway connectivity through the area, but also want to emphasize that this sub-area planning is looking for future land uses and developments in the area and does not specifically address either of those issues. But it's absolutely something that we are aware of and want to take into account as we look toward future developments in the area. One other thing to note is that the Colorado Department of Transportation owns and maintains State Highway 72, which is also part of Indiana Street, south of West 86th Parkway, up until it turns to the west at West 86th Parkway. So that's something that the city and CDOT work together on to make sure that the road can be used in the best possible way in its current state as long as possible. Next slide, please. So now we're going to head into the engagement part of the evening. We're going to ask if you can, either on your smartphone or in your web browser, you can head to www.menti.com. I'm also now going to put a link in the chat that you should be able to click on and access. So I just did that there. We'll wait for a couple seconds to allow everybody the opportunity to get to that website. When you do, you'll be prompted to enter that number code there, which is 8224663.
And just for people on the phone, do you want to just give the website and the code one more time?
Absolutely. Thank you, Allie. So the website is www.menti.com. And then you can go to the code. And then once you go to the website, you'll be asked to enter a code. The code is 8224663. All right. And I will start sharing that now. All right. So as I'm pausing on this question, folks can feel free to start answering the question. What we're looking for is, as we've discussed through the rest of the presentation earlier, we're looking at this area in the future over the next 10, 20 years is what the potential could be. We're well aware of some of the constraints of the area, but we want to hear from the community what you really think. And I'll be reading some of these out. You'll also be able to see them on the screen. And I do want to mention that we'll be collecting all of the responses this evening. They will be available for us to respond to. I know there's, I think, upwards of about 60 people joining us this evening, so I don't think that we will be able to necessarily answer every single question this evening, but you'll also have the opportunity to ask questions. You can always email us at the email address advance@arvada.org. You can also add some questions in the chat if you're not able to use Menti. And we really want to make sure that we're hearing from the community and that we're able to respond this evening. So we want to make sure we're offering multiple opportunities for everybody. So it looks like there's quite a few questions about a transit hub and increasing transit to the area. That is something that RTD, the Regional Transportation District, provides transit services for most of the Metro Denver area. There is a park and ride at Highway 93 and Highway 72, but that's absolutely something that we've talked about and would like to explore options for that. But right now, I know there's not enough service in the area to provide additional service right now, but that's something that we would want to look at in the plan. I'm also seeing a couple of comments about some pedestrian friendly areas and accessibility, which gets to the issue of connectivity and things like that that we've seen. Absolutely a lot of like walkable, bikeable areas and retail. Historic rural ranch character of the area, and that's absolutely something that we would want to explore in the future once we get into some design concepts or placemaking abilities and things like that. So at this point, just to keep things moving, I am going to advance to the next question, but want to know that we do get, we will get a complete printout essentially of all the responses that we're getting this evening, and we'll look through them and kind of compile them to make sure that we get a good understanding of what everybody's thinking. I will also say that as I advance to the next question, you'll be prompted to move to the next slide. Once you respond, you'll see a screen that may say refresh or just waiting to head to the next question. Please don't actually refresh your screen. That's kind of just a holding page. Sometimes if you actually refresh your browser, you can get kicked out. So we want to make sure that people don't lose that connection. We'll head on to the next question now. So now that we've heard a couple of those, we also want to hear, again, we've been doing some initial analysis and talking to the community a little bit, but really want to hear from folks that live in the area. What do you think some other potential challenges to development in the area, or just general, what challenges could there be in the area? And also be looking for chat in case anything needs to be there. I like that comment about the industrial businesses. That's something that we'll be talking about shortly as we talk a little bit more about phase 2 of the study area. Traffic is certainly something that we hear a lot about, and it's something that, again, that this plan is a little bit limited as far as how much we can address the existing infrastructure, but it's absolutely something that we want to take a look at. As far as the Jefferson Parkway is concerned, the most current plans can be seen. The Jefferson Parkway Highway Authority has a website that has a lot of current information. Again, that's a little outside the scope of this plan, so I can't personally speak to that. But that's something that the Jefferson Parkway Highway Authority, I believe, has some of that information there. I do also want to mention that this Mentimeter tool that we're using right now will leave this link active, I believe, for 2 days. So particularly folks that may be on the phone or maybe not be able to get to it. I think we can also provide a link on advancearvada.org so that folks can access it and provide additional feedback that way. I do want to speak to the question about unincorporated Jefferson County. That's something I wanted to address, that as we've seen on some of the other maps, quite a bit of this area is currently located in unincorporated Jefferson County. When we're talking about the sub-area plan and future developments, we would anticipate that any future development would need to annex into the city. And so that's where the city would be a little bit more involved in guiding the planning and development that way. We'll also mention that the annexation process is separate from this plan, but that's when a lot of analysis is done as far as environmental studies and traffic studies and things like that, specific to what development comes in. So that kind of analysis would happen at that time. My comment about looking to the future for the autonomous vehicles and thinking longer in the future. Also good to know about the subsistence hazards out in Leiden, and just that this area does have, as a lot of Colorado soils that need to be looked at. Probably 36 question. Again, that's something that Jefferson Parkway would really look at. As far as the question as to whether or not this is a done deal or not, that's something that is kind of that's the whole reason behind the meeting tonight, is that this plan is kind of a community process where staff is doing a lot of research, looking at this area, but we also want to hear from you, which is why we're out here talking to you tonight. We want to know what you think about the area and really put your ideas into this plan of this to see what it can look like for the future. So certainly the plan is under progress and we're working on it right now. And to make sure we're able to do that, I am again going to move on to the next question, but we do get a readout of all of these questions. So we'll be taking a look at them as we progress. All right, so now looking more to get into a little bit more details about what a future gathering place might look like in some of this area. And I know I saw a couple of comments about the Village Center and Village of Five Parks. I know that's something that we hear a lot, that people really enjoy that space and think it fits really well into the community. That's something that I think people would like to see another kind of thing of here, but we really want to see, to get to that, what do you think placemaking means? I know it's a buzzword that a lot of people use, but that's where we kind of want to start seeing if there's anything that this community out here really has a idea of what they would like to see. Nice, more swimming pools. We'll let this build out a little bit. I will also say that as we're waiting for some of this to build out a little bit more, I did see someone put a question in there asking about the Amazon warehouse plan and how that fits in this plan. Again, do want to emphasize this plan is really focused, the study area is north of the Union Pacific Railroad tracks, right at the Village of Five Parks up to West 96th Parkway. So the Project Indiana is outside of the study area, so it's not something that this plan speaks to at all. More information about that can be found on the city's website about Project Indiana. If you search for arvada.org and search Project Indiana, there's a website that has a lot of information about that there. But this plan doesn't speak to that at all. So I'm seeing a lot of walkability popping up, family friendly, variety of public library. We've seen about 10 responses so far. Kind of curious to see what else we might get. So I'll leave this up for another probably about 10, 15 seconds. See if we can get a couple more responses. Seeing a lot of desire for water features, which would be nice out in this area. Greenery, restaurants. Black pub. Thanks, Ben, for putting that link in the chat for the direct link to Project Indiana. Cool. So it looks like the biggest things that have popped out are the walkability and variety. Generally seeing a lot of desire for some more water features in the area, which I don't think we've heard before. So again, so we'll leave this open if people want to add some more comments in here, but I'm enjoying what I'm seeing so far, that it's certainly something that we can work with as we head into the future. So moving on to the next question, if a specific gathering area were to be developed in the study area, we want to hear from you where the best location would be. Again, this is something where ultimately it will depend on individual property owners, how it's developed, and traffic studies and things like that. But we want to get a general sense from the community, from folks who live out here, that where you think the best potential location would be, and generally within the red study area itself. So in Mentimeter, you should be able to click on an image of this map and hit submit. When you do that, a little dot will show up on this map, and then we'll see how many responses we get there. Good. So you get a couple people looking up towards the western edge, up north of Welton Reservoir. Nice. Thanks everybody for putting in dots. This is a lot of good information for us to consider. you see a question about what do I mean by gathering area? There's no specific definition. It kind of gets to the placemaking question that we had. Thinking broadly, one thing that we've heard from the community is that there's kind of a desire for more commercial areas, restaurants, sit-down areas, things like that. So again, no specific guidance for gathering area, but kind of whatever you think of. If you want to go out and hang out with your community or hang out with family, friends, once we're really able to do that again, that's kind of what we're getting at when we mean gathering area. All right, looks like we have a good 20 or so responses and a couple of dots popping up, quite a few people looking towards west of the current King Supers up off of Candelas Parkway there. A couple other folks looking around intersection of Indiana and Candelas Parkway. There's a couple folks looking a little bit further south towards the intersection of West 86th Parkway in Indiana. So a good bit of diversity in preferences here. Again, we'll be keeping this open. So if you have an opportunity to pop point on there in the future, you can do that in the next couple of days. So now we'll head on to the next question. And for this part, we're moving on to phase 2 of the plan. This looks a little bit further west, pretty much west of Welton Reservoir, all the way to Highway 93, really focusing just south of Candelas, where there's this purple area that's kind of right in the middle. This is all currently located in unincorporated Jefferson County. It's all currently zoned I-2 for heavy industrial uses in Jefferson County. Within the city, there's also a couple of light industrial and industrial smaller users on the outskirts there. It should also be noted, as I'm sure folks in this area know, quite a few of these parcels are currently vacant or kind of underutilized for industrial uses. So this is something that we want to kind of just start talking about as we look towards the future, as some of these businesses may redevelop or change, whether the existing industrial zoning is really appropriate for the area. As Carol mentioned again earlier, some of the zone districts, I'll point them out quickly. The red area, the CG, is kind of commercial, which is your typical commercial, retail, restaurant uses. R6 over to the east is pretty standard residential suburban development. The lighter purple area within the city is light industrial, so think some warehousing, some light manufacturing, things like that. And then the slightly darker purple is general industrial, which is typically a little bit heavier manufacturing, storage yards, logistics centers, things like that. And then also open space. There's also planned unit development districts. All of, as Carol mentioned, when it comes to Candelas, this is all suburban residential development, typically single family and duplexes. Off to the west is also planned unit development, but this is more intended for kind of commercial uses and things like that. Those would have to go to city council for approval should they be developed. So let's see now, let's see if we're getting some responses as far as whether the existing industrial zoning is appropriate. So it looks like we're getting quite a few people and quite a few people looking at the uses, thinking that they're not quite appropriate. So it looks like we've gotten quite a few uses. Again, these will stay open for a couple of days if you want to respond, if you're not able to now. Looking again at this area, if it were to redevelop down the line, we want to get a sense of what folks would think of different uses in the area. Generally looking at a couple different options for light industrial, general industrial, commercial, residential, or mixed use, which is really the kind of the gamut of uses that could exist there. Again, seeing quite a few comments in the chat, similarly getting at this idea of preferring preference for light industrial or moving away from industrial. One question about RV and boat storage as a use. Yeah, like an RV storage lot or boat storage, things like that are typically considered a light industrial use. Mixed, I see a comment from Carl about mixed use. It's generally a term for, so when we talk about zone districts, the original intent of zone districts was really to separate out different uses. So conceptually, you didn't want a super heavy commercial user directly next to a residential user. So you create different zones to make sure that there's appropriate standards and separation, things like that. When we talk about mixed use, that's kind of a newer type of zoning, which would allow, and it's more popular in kind of old town, downtown areas. And actually Old Town Arvada is a great example of mixed use. It's where traditionally you would have commercial storefront on the first floor and maybe some residential above. That's called vertical mixed use. You can also have horizontal mixed use, where in a smaller area you have some commercial centers, commercial stores with residential kind of integrated into the site. So that's generally what we mean by mixed use, generally just looking at commercial and residential kind of coexisting in the same kind of small area. All right. I'm liking the responses and again, appreciate everyone's engagement and provide input. This is great for us to look at as we continue developing the plan and hope to present more in future open houses. So again, this is our last directed question that we have at the moment, but we are now going to open it up into more just general questions. Again, if you're using Mentimeter, and that's www.menti.com, you can go there and add in any questions that you want. We also see quite a few questions in the chat, so we'll see if we can address some of those. So it is about 10 to 7. We want to make sure we don't take up everyone's evening, but we're going to hang around for a bit, see what questions we get, see what we can answer. I'll also ask other city staff members to jump in and answer any questions that you see. If we want to, I see a question popping up, are apartments plans? So this plan at the moment does not have any particular plans. I know there are developments that are currently in the review process. I don't know if any other staff members can speak to whether or not they're apartments. I don't believe so.
There is development plans that's going for multifamily in Candelas. So that is within the R24 area. There is also townhomes along Indiana Whisper Creek Village to the east, where most of the suburban residential, they're proposing townhomes there as well. But the uses that you have for the mixed use suburban R6, R24 and R13 allows for apartments and multifamily developments. So the zoning does allow for those areas wherever those are zoned, as well as in the future, if a mixed use development comes in and they would like to have retail, commercial along the Indiana corridor, they can also add residential and probably a more high density building to serve the on the mixed use suburban districts. So combination of that as well. But it is there is a lot of activity going up and down Indiana already, and there'll probably be more in the future. So we're assuming that that's what's going to happen with the zoning districts that we have, and that's one of the reasons why we're engaging you folks.
Cool. Thank you very much. I'll, for the moment, mark that as answered and see what other questions we have. How would existing industrial be handled in the future if zoning changed? So just as far as the way that typically works is individual property owners would seek rezoning from the city. So in the instance of industrial areas already within the city, the property owners themselves would need to seek a rezoning. And so that would depend on their plan for how they want to develop their property. Same thing with the current property that's located in unincorporated Jefferson County. They would ask to come into the city and ask to be rezoned. So this is not something where the city would, forcibly rezone areas necessarily. This is something where the individual property owners would be working with the city to see how that would work. Are there any plans to have trails around Welton Reservoir? That is something where off the top of my head, I don't know if there are any specific plans for that. I know that our City Parks Department does have master plans, and that generally Welton Reservoir is indicated as open space and used for recreation. So that's something that we might need to get back to folks with.
Unfortunately, the Welton Reservoir, there was some discussion with the city staff to have a trail around it. However, because of the requirements for them in terms of contamination and things like that, they didn't decided that they weren't going to have any type of trails going around the reservoir. However, we've also added connections around the adjacent properties to kind of go down to to 72 Highway 72 that would connect down to as John was showing some of the trail connections, but unfortunately the trails are not available on Welton Reservoir.
Thanks, I forgot about that, Carol. But yeah, it's something we do have to remember, that it is a drinking water supply. So the folks that operate and maintain that want to make sure that that's kept safe. Is there ever any discussion about trail paths to connect Candelas and Leiden through the industrial area? That's something we heard at the last open house as well. It's something that I know personally we would love to see something like that. The biggest barrier is the railroad tracks and Union Pacific Railroad. So it's something that I'm sure we'll look at a little bit more as part of this plan, but there's a very real physical barrier there that is something that is difficult to overcome, but it's absolutely something that we're aware people are interested in and to look at as part of the plan. With the additional development plans, we will absolutely have to address the bottleneck at Indiana Railroad track. Can you give us a time frame for improving and widening this? Not sure if there's any other staff on the call that could address this, but again, it is something that the city is very well aware of and is in a lot of plans, but I don't believe there's a specific time frame that we can provide at this point. Can we have a quick update on Jefferson Parkway? Again, unfortunately, since there is a independent Jefferson Parkway Highway Authority that kind of manages everything there, they're the best place to get updates from the Jefferson Parkway on. It's not something that we can necessarily talk to because it is outside the scope of this plan. So we can't provide that this evening. To the previous comment about retail versus number of residents, meaning we won't see sit-down restaurants and shopping here in the near future. That's not something that is set in stone or absolutely determined, but it is something that we've interacted with an independent kind of retail consultant, someone who really their profession is examining this kind of information, and their analysis shows that that really to have a retail anchor and all of the kind of composite accessory restaurants and additional retail and commercial that comes along with that, you really need about 20,000 households within a 2-mile area. As we saw in some of the other information we presented this evening, just within the study area and immediate influence areas, which is about a mile and a half, depending on where you're measuring, there's about 5,000 households. So it's something that is really part of the plan, and why we're looking at this area is that what we hear a lot from the community is that there is this desire for additional restaurants, shopping, gathering places in the area. And from the information we have and analysis we have, what the analysis points to is that in order to get more of those, we need more density in the area. We need more kind of residences in the area to be able to attract those businesses to be able to come and develop there. So it's something that we want to explore more and see what we can do. I saw a comment in the chat that I did also want to bring up from Manuel saying you took the Government 101 class with the city, which first want to thank you for taking that. Always happy when folks are learning more about their city and the government. But you said when you were there was talk about limiting the Arvada population growth up to 140,000. What population growth do we see for Arvada? Do we have enough water for everyone? Will reservoirs be expanded? Will taxes increase so that we can repair the roads with larger population? I'll kind of take those one at a time. As far as the overall population and water, that's also something that's very relevant to this area of the city. I believe the last estimate we have, and this information is all, I believe, presented to City Council annually or maybe once every couple of years, but the current anticipated build out is about 150,000 residents. That does take into account the current water allotment that the city has and potential future water allotment. As some folks may know, the city works with Denver Water to get most of our water supply, and Denver Water is currently working on expanding their water supply with the Gross Reservoir up in Boulder County. So the city is kind of party to that, and should when Gross Reservoir is expanded, it'll add to the city's ability to provide water to residents. But even taking that into account, I believe the maximum build out is about 150,000 people. And Patty, I saw you unmute yourself there. I'm sure you're much better suited to answer some of this. I don't know if you had anything to add on that.
That comprehensive plan also includes projected population growth in the city. And if you have more, I can provide more information to that specifically. I don't know that information off the top of my head. However, annually, the city takes a look at the population growth using census information, and we inform, that is part of our, that is part of the process in creating strategic planning for the city. The council and staff uses that for strategic planning, and the comprehensive plan has the projected build out, and it's pretty on task based, pretty on target based on our census information from last year. Thank you.
Thanks. And let's see, I know, so it's just, oh, and I do want to say, I know the last part of your question there asked, will taxes increase so that we can repair roads with this larger population? I don't want to ignore that question, but do just have to say that that's well beyond my ability as a planner to kind of answer. That's something that is part of a broader conversation that would occur with City Council. So didn't want you to think that we're ignoring that, but unfortunately that's not something that I can answer for you. Do want to check in. I know we're just a little bit past 7 p.m. this evening. What I might say for our city folks is if we want to provide information where folks can get more information, where folks can go to find more information about the area, and again, say a little thank you, and then we can go back and answer questions maybe for another 15, 20 minutes. Again, we really appreciate people coming out and participating this evening. It's something where the more people participate, the more information we have to actually develop these plans. So we really enjoy folks coming out, but we also know everyone has busy lives, and we don't want to take up all of your evening. So I might...
John, do we want to talk about responding to these comments? We might not be able to answer all the questions, but we can respond back to them.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. We can provide some of that information, then go back to answering some questions for the next 15 or 20 minutes, but let folks know what's coming next. If Patty, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. And again, I would like to reiterate what Jonathan said. Our team and the city, we really appreciate all your time and the participation for the meeting tonight and getting your feedback. We've gotten a lot of great information, and it gives us good homework to work with to continue working on developing the sub-area plan. Now that we have your input, we'll use this information to move into the next phase to develop the focus, ideas, and recommendations to create the sub-area plan. And we will present more of this developed plan and its framework for your input at the next community meeting, which is anticipated to be scheduled this summer. So we look forward to working with you and continuing this participation and dialogue. If you have any questions, please contact us at advance@arvada.org with any questions or comments. And then you can also visit the Advance Arvada website, where we will continue giving updates for these planning efforts, including Northwest Arvada sub-area plan. And you also can find additional information there and can provide more comments as well. And again, Jonathan, did you want to continue with questions? I think you otherwise I will say thank you, everybody. If you want to hang on, we have a few more moments so we can answer more questions if you like, and have a good evening.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I'll go back. I believe people will still have the opportunity to ask questions through Mentimeter, and I know folks have been very active in the chat, which we really appreciate. And again, so we get a readout of both the Mentimeter comments as well as the chat comments in the Zoom chat. So we'll be going through all of these and making sure that we're able to address a lot of the larger concerns. I saw one, so Lexi had a question a little while back about before we made it seem like we needed 20,000 residents, not houses, which is it. Just want to say, I apologize. I'm not sure if I misspoke or not, but the report where we're getting that from is also on advancearvada.org. If you go there and click on the Northwest sub-area plan, I believe it's the Candelas retail study that's there. So the Katie Press is the retail consultant that put that together. And her analysis is 20,000 residents needed about in a 2-mile area to attract a large anchor for retail and things like that. Let's see.
I would also like to add, Jonathan, that this will also be, we will also be using the Speak Up Arvada platform, which is on the city website. We'll be giving the opportunity to answer these questions and answer survey responses from the presentation this evening on that platform, and that will be on the website next week sometime. We do have all your emails and your email addresses, and we will provide an update and let you know when that's available. And we will also continue to use your email addresses for future notices and information as we develop and generate other community opportunities for your input. So thank you.
Absolutely. So look at this question that is popped up. Why was the height requirements increased? This hurts the view so many of us enjoy. As far as the general height requirements, I know in the so the city went through a land development code update last year, which changed how some of the zone districts worked. Prior to that, there had generally been a 35-foot height limit throughout the city, and then people could seek exceptions to that to build higher. This northwest area is probably one of the unique areas of the city where when the Candelas development was initially planned and thought out, there were quite a few areas where heights much taller than 35 feet were allowed. Kind of as Carol mentioned, and Carol will probably kick to you in a second, because I know you can talk in a lot more detail about this. But as some of the areas were rezoned, some of the heights were actually decreased to fit more in line with newer development. Generally, when we increase certain areas, and generally in this area, when we're looking at the commercial uses and mixed uses, the height limit went from 35 feet to 45 feet. That the main reason for that is just to accommodate building types that can go there. So when you're looking at larger shopping areas or apartments, they really need to be able to get to 4 stories to be able to make that work. So that's really the main reason behind the 45-foot increase. But Carol, I'll kick it to you if you have anything to add.
Yes, so again, this is a mixed-use suburban residential, a mixed use with suburban residential, commercial office, non-residential uses. The intent was, looking around the area, really most of the homes are within that 1 to 3 stories. And so the suburban mixed use accommodates and respects the residential that's existing. And when Candelas was first, like John was saying, was approved, they had on this side, they had up to 80 feet on this side, 80 feet for building, for any type of mixed use building. And then then to the west side where 93 and Candelas Parkway, along that edge, they also increased that. I think it went up to about 160 feet tall. Buildings could go in there because the intent was they were going to have quite a lot of commercial non-residential uses, and they wanted to go up high. They were thinking of major buildings going up there. Since the new code has been changed, the zoning district here, we really have reduced the area in terms of height to be more similar to the and realistically similar to the suburban residentials that's surrounding this area. So it has really dropped, although like John said, we need about 45 feet to accommodate a mixed-use building, a multifamily, and that is what would be allowed in these areas, but their maximum height would be 45 feet.
Let's move on. Oh, good. All right. So I think this is one that I answered just a little while ago. On to the next one. What about incentives to encourage local small businesses to set up shop here instead of encouraging large chains? The rural ranch character and history of the area could be a great character building, and it looks like that may have gotten cut off. Again, this is something we hear a lot, and it's something that we would like to encourage as much as we can. One thing that I think can get lost when we're talking about these kind of planning and future development and things like that is that the city doesn't get to decide exactly what businesses are developed in specific areas. The role that we have is to develop the zone districts, which allow certain uses in certain areas that depend a lot on the existing infrastructure and what it can support and how it fits into the larger community. So when we zone an area for a commercial use or for mixed use, that allows anyone that meets that to be able to go in there and develop their private land. Unfortunately, the reality of the economy and how retail and commercial market works is that it is incredibly expensive to build new buildings, get it set up, build all the infrastructure to support that. And so typically what happens in areas like this that don't have a lot of the density to support a lot of variety of commercial areas is that the only people that are able to actually spend the money to develop retail and commercial are the large chain areas, the national folks that have a national area that they can draw on and could potentially lose some money up front before they become profitable. So it's really difficult to get small businesses to develop in an area if they don't have a large residential area that they can count on to draw people there to keep them open and operating. So that's a lot of what we're trying to look at in this area to try and figure out, if this is truly, if people really want local small businesses to come here, we need to figure out a way to attract them. And so far, a lot of the analysis is that we need to be able to increase the density and get more people there to support the small businesses. This is something that we want to hear from folks, though, because that does come with trade-offs. And I know a lot of people like the kind of Western rural feel out here. And so it's a little bit of a conflict that we want to hear from the community and see what people think about the concept. Again, part of large part of why we're doing this plan.
The interesting part that's also happening with the commercial builders out there, they are building tenant finished buildings. And like you had indicated, there are probably more opportunities there if you can rent a space there. So there is that type of buildings that you can access and we would like to encourage more local. And one of the ones that has recently is moving forward is Marco's Pizza. They're opening up a food hall in Candalis, and they were in the Village of Five Park downtown there, and so now they're expanding up to that area. So there are opportunities with the existing builders that are out there, but yeah, for the most part, they're going for other type of businesses.
Thanks. Another question, do we have enough water for everyone? Will the reservoir be expanded? Kind of touched on that a little while ago, that water is absolutely something that is considered when we look at future development and what the population that the city can support. And part of that does involve Growth Reservoir being expanded to meet that full potential. Are there plans to add more schools due to adding apartments and multi-units? Thanks for asking that. I don't think we mentioned that in the presentation, but as part of any new residential development that occurs throughout the city, anytime anyone creates a new residential unit, whether it's a single vacant lot where someone builds one house, or it's a larger developer coming in and building 20, 30 more residential houses, every time that happens, there's a park development fee and a school development fee that is assessed. And that's so that the city can continue to provide more parks and maintain the parks that we have for the entire population, and to make sure that the Jefferson County School District has the resources they need to support the school population throughout the area. Obviously, the city does not own or operate any schools. We work with Jefferson County and Adams County for both of those. So again, whenever residential development occurs, we collect fees that go to the school system, and then ultimately the Jefferson County school system determines when a school needs to be expanded or a school needs to be added or anything like that. So it's not something that that the city directly plans, but we absolutely work with the Jefferson County school system to make sure that they're able to support the education of the area.
Can I just add one thing? Where the existing school, the Three Creeks, that side was dedicated through the Candelas residential master developer there. So that there's a 25 acre site there, and the intent was at some point they may be expanding in that area for more school space. But that's something that, again, that Jefferson County school districts will determine if additional school sites are going to be needed. But that site could also add additional spaces for higher ed for that site.
Thank you. And it is a little after 7:15 now, so I'll see one more question and let folks continue on with their evening. But again, do want to reiterate that I know we've gotten a lot more questions than we're able to directly address this evening. So we are going to look at all the questions, take it in, and we'll be presenting more information to you probably this summer. Okay, and again, and this is something that I think I talked about a little while ago. Again, this is kind of a part of a larger conversation that would happen with City Council. Development itself, whenever any new development comes in, they're charged with improving the condition directly adjacent to their property. So that's one thing that we do look for. Should any of the parcels on the west side of Indiana Street develop, they would be responsible for widening Indiana and putting in improvements and things like that. So that's part of how we get some of these improvements. So let's see, one more question. So it's another water question that we've kind of answered. far as ridgeline ordinance, there are no specific ridgeline ordinances or things like that. Different municipalities do have preservation of view corridors and things like that. It's something that the city hasn't really done much of in the past, but whenever we talk about view corridors and generally preserving views, one thing that that the city and I know a lot of people are very sensitive to is the balancing of people absolutely love to be able to see the mountains and be able to see the views. At the same time, individual property owners also have the right to develop their property to certain standards. And so if you impose a view restriction in certain areas, you're also restricting the ability of someone to use the property to the full extent that is typically allowed. So that's always something that we want to balance when we're looking at this kind of thing. But it's certainly something that we hear a lot from the community, that people love living in this area because of a lot of the views. See if.
So I think with that, we should probably wrap it up, Jonathan, do you think? And then we can respond back to other people and post it on advance@arvada.org. I
think that's a great idea. So with that, thank you again, everybody, for joining. Yeah, check out advancearvada.org for more information, and check out Speak Up Arvada. In the next couple of weeks, we'll have some more opportunities for input through that method.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.